registered for this webinar, and we expect that they'll be joining as they do throughout the webinar, but we will have the entire thing available for you to see in a recorded format at any time that you're ready. Also, because you're attending, if you're interested or need a certificate, we're able to provide you with a certificate that verifies 1 hour of attendance for participating in the webinar today. And you just need to email us and let us know that you want the certificate at calpro@air.org, and we will get that right off to you. All right, so building a strong knowledge base and skill set for today's adult education leaders. We are so delighted that we have one of today's adult education leaders, Miss Jody Slider, doing our webinar for us today. She's the director at Corona Norco Adult School, which is a part of Corona Norco Unified School District, but she's also been a member of the adult education community for over 25 years. She served as a teacher, a program coordinator, and currently an administrator. Throughout her career, she's served on a number of committees, including the California Adult Education Strategic Planning Committee, which I believe that might have been when I first met Jody. She's also been a part of the Field Partnership Team, a part of the CASAS Program Evaluation Team, the AXA Adult Ed Council, the CAIA Executive Board, the AEBG Implementation Focus Team, the Riverside Workforce Development Center, the Western Committee, and now is serving on the CalPro Advisory Board, and we are so delighted to have her with us. She's a strong commitment to California's redesign of our adult education services and is passionate about serving adults. Again, we are happy to have her here, and in addition to her role as a director of Corona Norco Adult School, she's also the regional director for the About Students Regional Consortium for Adult Education in Riverside. Jody, I'm going to turn it over to you, and please know that there will be an opportunity to ask questions throughout, but as Winnie said, feel free to use the chat, the general chat pod.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining me this afternoon. I'm honored that Charisse asked me to share a little bit on experiences and ideas about building knowledge and skills for today's leaders in adult education, because I feel very passionate about the leaders in adult ed. It's our time to step up and make sure that adult education stays strong in California. And so I appreciate you being here today and just joining me in this conversation. So thank you for your time. I know you're busy. I'm certain you're extremely busy. So we really want this time to be valuable to you and a time that you can share your experiences. I'm really hoping that this webinar is as much a conversation as it can be. So I realize that you can hear me. I can't hear you, but I can see questions that you might have. So please feel free to ask questions throughout. In the handouts pod at the bottom left, there is a link there to the presentation slides. You're welcome to copy those, download them so that you have them right all over them, whatever you need to do. That's one of your resources. And additionally, we're going to add another sheet of resources that are available to you. Hopefully this is going to be information that will be valuable to you, that you can take away and say, okay, these are some steps that I'm going to take to build my knowledge and to build my skills for my role as a adult education leader in California, because we need every single leader in adult ed as we transition into this new dimension of our careers and our services to our students. So thanks again for being here. Feel free to give me any questions throughout. We'll have questions and conversation time, but feel free to post a question anytime you need to. So today we're going to focus on some of our objectives. So this is what I hope to have our conversation focused around. What that adult education leader really looks like in terms of how we can be effective and what's the knowledge that we need. We're going to talk about what that person looks like and feels like and sounds like, and a little bit more about what kinds of skills and knowledge we can focus on in those topics. We can also spend some time looking at what the demand is for our expertise. And I want to share with you some experiences that I've had in different venues and different times that have kind of called me on to a level that I needed to be ready and able to respond to. So kind of that, what do we need to know on a daily basis, and how do we then experience and decide upon our professional growth areas so that we can target some specific areas of learning. Then we'll talk about building capacity in your own leadership abilities and looking at some resources. Just doesn't cut it to just talk about what those skills need to be and what the knowledge needs to be, but it does require that we really look at some resources and sometimes go after that information. And then I'd encourage you, at the end we're going to talk about taking some steps and setting some goals, some professional goals, some individual goals, some personal goals, and maybe even discussing what we can do to build that networking so that we have all the resources that we need. So our agenda kind of looks like we'll talk about knowledge and a knowledgeable leader in adult education and what topics, areas are most critical. We're going to list some of those out and talk about specifics of what they are. We're going to then kind of shift to skill sets and talk about, as an individual, what kinds of skills we need in that capacity. Again, make probably some more ideas, list ideas about what our next steps are, and then finalize with some resources. So that's where we're going today. I hope it will meet your needs, and please let me know if you have some suggestions or even questions as we go along. So one of the things that we talk about in terms of knowledge and what we need to know, one of my favorite things that I've heard different people say, and I've felt them myself, is I don't know what I need to know. And that's a starting point. Sometimes we don't know what we still need to learn about, but that's a place to be so that we can start building upon that. And the reality is we just can't know everything, but we can strive to be informed. We can strive to meet the expectations that call us to becoming more informed. And when I talk about expectations, what I mean there is that we have expectations from staff, we have expectations from colleagues, from our district, from our communities, from industry, to be the experts on adult education. And we're asked about that all the time, and we're put into positions to where we represent adult education and the answer, because we're a unique entity, we're a unique group of educators that not everybody knows about what's happening in adult education. And especially now with AEBG and new WIOA and all of the changes that are happening with adult education, more and more we're called upon to be the experts in adult education and to know what everything means. So it challenges us. Our students rely upon us. Our districts, our colleagues, our staff rely upon us to be the answer, but we don't always have to do that. And we can always give ourselves a little bit of a breather and say, okay, that's what we need to do when we have to look for some of those responses. And so the current climate right now in education and in legislation, we need to be informed about that. We need to know what the governor's budget's going to look like when it comes out. We need to know and listen for topics that you don't know or you're not familiar with, so that you can stay current with local and state information. One of the things that a former superintendent used to share with us was that you've got to be there at the table and be present and be listening and be part of the conversation. One of Don Kepke's famous, I say famous, she's a lobbyist for CCAE and CAIA. What she always says is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Well, that's a little bit as the same analogy, is that you got to be present and be part of our conversations. And that's in a lot of different arenas, not just at your organization, but it's also at your district, in your community, and just being there gives you an opportunity to be the face of adult education. So find solutions to any current challenges by being willing to participate and be present. Be willing to learn and explore new ideas, and most importantly, ask questions. The questions that you have, I'm sure somebody else has. We all have them, and we're all constantly learning. So stay current, be involved, go to meetings even when you think you don't have time to be there. Ask questions and be a voice that helps to inform others about adult education, but also to support the programs and the processes. Part of that conversation piece is about talking with others that don't know our industry. They don't know necessarily what we do and who we serve and how we contribute to the community. And so part of our willingness to be that voice is certainly a valuable step in adult education, especially now. If you don't get answers, be persistent and find them. One of the things that I decided long ago is that I'm going to find out whatever I need to find out in order to do the job that I need to do, no matter what it might be. And one of the things that I always try to do is go to the source of the information, so that I can, be the detective and know for a fact what is accurate and what is the absolute vital information that is needed in a situation. So many times we're in conversations that we hear our colleagues and different folks say, I heard that this happened, and so we need to do this, or I heard that that isn't allowable. Look it up and find the answers. I would really encourage you to always go to the sources of information. So some of our conversation today is going to be about those sources. Okay, so let's take a minute and think about about adult education leaders whom you have come in contact with, that you know, and consider what their knowledge level is. What does he or she know, and how did he or she acquire that information? You know who you go to when you have questions about programs or about budgets, or you have questions about personnel, or what does the data tell us? How do I read this data? You know who you go to. And professional organizations also help us to develop knowledge and provide resources for those pieces of information that we can always rely upon for sources. You know who is involved in community partnerships and integration, and how they develop those relationships and really make things happen. We've all been in conversations where you're at the table and you're talking about workforce, for example, and you're hearing about referral systems, and then you wonder, where is it going to go from here? How are we going to implement things, and how are we going to make things happen? Find those individuals, those leaders that you know are going to be action people, and know that they're going to take action about that solution, whatever that might be. it's really about connecting with people who are going to take action and help you to do the job that you need to do. One of the strongest pieces of information and support that I've experienced and I've encouraged other people to experience is the CalPro Leadership Institute. These 6 topics here that are listed under a strong knowledge topic base include all of those 6 topics, so that the CalPro Leadership, which is a application process through CalPro that you can attend, is a great professional development opportunity for you or for your colleagues to learn more about processes, about programs, about budgets, personnel concerns, as well as data. It covers all 6 of these areas. So if you haven't had the opportunity, I would encourage you to apply to the next round. Recently, the window just closed for the application, and yet there'll be another cohort. I'm not sure when. Maybe Charisse can share that with us, but there will be another cohort, and it's a great place to start and build your learning capacity. So I believe that those are, I think Charisse is saying, each year. So please look for that opportunity, because each of these topics are addressed in the CalPro Leadership. Great institution. So what I'd like for you to do now is we're going to have a chat, and I'll go back to the previous slide in just a moment. But what I'd like for you to do is kind of participate in a conversation. So this is where you can kind of give your input and talk about what your knowledge base is, and share in the chat box. And we have the chat box open here at the bottom, and about what you think you have in your strongest area of knowledge content, and share how you got there. So let's go back to our topics here. Pick one of those that you can say, you know what, I'm really strong in data and accountability, and I learned this by, let's share with one another a little bit about what your strengths are, and talk about how you got there, because that's really the bottom line. We all want to know, how did you get there? How did you learn that information? Where did you go to acquire that information? Okay, so I'm looking for comments. Are you thinking about what your strongest area is? And there's a question there at the bottom. From the list of knowledge topic areas, share one you think is strongest and cite how you acquired that information. What was your resource? Was it a person? Was it attending something? And you're welcome to, I see some of you are typing. Great. So Lisa, if you don't mind, I'm going to share yours first, because you popped right up there on the screen. So budgets and fiscal management. Great. That's a tough one. And she shares that her principal immersed her in this before she retired, so she would know as much as I could. So as your principal was retiring, she wanted you to learn the experiences there and know budgets and fiscal management. Great. That's a great resource. Here's another one that gives credit to their administrator or maybe a mentor in program objectives. Okay, Lisa shares being fiscal agent for a consortium is part of it. Working with mentors seems to be a theme that is coming up. Oh, Laura, great contribution. Okay, community partnerships area. Okay, and she made an effort to attend meetings at agencies in the area. Good job. It's hard to take time away from what we think is our work and our job to take time away and get to those meetings, but it makes a huge difference when you have face-to-face time. Here's another. Christy shares that she gained knowledge again from mentors and being a full-time faculty member. Okay, you have the time to devote to those areas. Great. But she confesses, I have zero knowledge of budget. That's okay, Christy. They give you a headache. Oh, they give everyone a headache. No, I agree. Great, another response of mentorship. A lot of folks learn things from others and learn skills and gain knowledge from working with someone. And Bird, I totally agree. You have to develop all of those knowledge base areas. You've got to have a piece of all of them. You're absolutely right. Okay, more typing. Great. Great, personnel. Christy's resource was human resources training. There's lots of trainings out there, both locally and with other organizations that can really help and bring that knowledge to you. Oh, great. I was hoping somebody would say data and accountability. Stephen shared that data and accountability is his strength. That's great. And CalPro Leadership Institute was one of his resources, along with CASA's webinars and trainings. Great. Mentorship, excellent. Okay. All right. So we know what things, and thank you for sharing. We know some things that we have learned. We know some things that we've got expertise in, so we can kind of check those off the list. And now we can kind of talk about, let's take some time now and really talk about, well, out of all of those areas, what do we really need to know? What's the critical thing? So we're going to spend more time here on that list of items and topics. And as Burr said earlier, we need to know at least a little bit about everything. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about how much we need to know in each one and where those resources are. So in the next few slides, you can see on this one that it has items that are in black font on the left-hand side. Those are going to be our topic discussion items, and we're going to talk and share about that. The items on the right-hand side are resources that, if you're looking at programs such as curriculum and instruction, the cluster on the right in red are some resources for you to look at and go to see what kind of information or additional information you might need. Okay, so let's talk there are four that are really big hitters, and here are two of them that are listed here. The program and curriculum area really indicates, okay, what kinds of definitions of program objectives do we need in AEBG? How many programs are there? We can probably all rattle off the 7 program areas in AEBG, and we know what they are, we know what their titles are, but I'm talking about definitions and things that are a little bit deeper than just simply what the title of a program area is. So we need to know those 7 program areas, but for AEBG purposes, but we also need to know, who do they serve? What are the program goals? What should be the content in those program areas? What's appropriate courses that fit into those programs? What are the goals of the students in those programs? Students rely upon us to place them in the appropriate programs for their learning. And a lot of times that overlaps, and how we can connect students to various programs depending upon their educational goals. So understanding programs, their definitions, their goals, as well as what the course content and curriculum will look needs to be embedded into. And when you look at students and their goals, you also need to be thinking about the outcomes of those programs, because we're measured by our outcomes, and our outcomes really tell a story about those programs, focusing on that end result. What is the outcome for a program, and what's happening to make sure that students get to that outcome? You need to know what's going on in the classroom. You always need to know what's going on in the classroom. And that's a difficult thing, especially if you have a campus that is spread out throughout your area or throughout the community where you serve students. Sometimes it's difficult to connect students there. And it's hard to monitor always what's going on in the classroom. So be aware of those classroom necessities and how that happens. We need to know what the approval process is, not just at the state level with AEBG, with CDE and WIOA, but we also need to know our local approval processes. So on the right, there's some ideas there, or there's some resources there that you can research. The AB 104 program guidance is a great document for sharing with you all about what needs to happen in programs and how they're defined for AEBG. The general assurances really share what you have to do or what you must do, and really staying on top of those. CDE Adult Ed Office is a great resource for WIOA and all of the requirements under WIOA. Again, a program curriculum instruction, there are many different projects that are listed here: CalPro webinars, CASAS competencies and trainings, OTAN courses and trainings, the distance learning symposium that will be coming up. Octave is another great resource for standards. Keeping in mind accreditations, when you talk about WASC accreditations, COE accreditations, all of those are great resources to focus on program curriculum and instruction. So that's one chunk of a lot of information that we need to be familiar with and know where to go to for resources. Budget and fiscal management. Budget and fiscal management is sometimes one of the biggest challenges because they do give us headaches, as it was mentioned earlier, but the numbers need to be right, and as a leader in adult education, you got to be on top of it, knowing your resources, knowing your fund sources and where they come from, those restrictions and expenditure, allowable expenditures, and what the guidelines are for those budgets, because obviously if you don't follow those structures and those requirements, you can really be penalized, as well as in a really difficult place when it comes to reporting. We've all been concerned about, have we reported accurately what our expenditures are, etc. And it's really important to keep those clean and watch for those due dates. But in addition to reporting, we also need to be aware of cost projections and going into a year or a term knowing what the costs of your program might be. So knowing how much does that ESL class cost, knowing exactly how much in personnel and materials and supplies you need to get something done. Being on top of that is also part of managing the budget and getting the resources to the needs and program development. On the side there, I've listed a couple of things. Knowing your SACS account codes, and I realize that SACS is what is used for K-12 adult education, but not necessarily for community colleges, and I apologize, I'm not familiar with your system in colleges, but knowing the SACS code structure and understanding that is important not only for you, but it's also important for your business department to build confidence in your decision making when it comes to budgets. The AEBG Fiscal Management Guide is another great resource that's on the AEBG website for fiscal management and reporting expectations. There's a lot of great examples and information in those guides. So I encourage you. It just came, a revision just came out recently, a few months ago, and it's really a rich resource for knowing how AEBG funding can be used, should be used, and what the reporting requirements are. Now with the new NOVA system, keeping on top of the AEBG fiscal reporting will be critical. But there's a lot of good support through TAP with the fiscal management of AEBG funds. And I want to share with you one experience that I had with my business services personnel that really changed how I approach budget and fiscal management. Like was mentioned before, it was kind of one of those things that just caused a headache. So I met with one of our accountants in our district, and he sat down with me and through a series of questions understood better how I approach adult education funding for our programs. And he asked me a lot of questions, and then because adult education funding can be sporadic and changes, and there's a lot of things that go on, and it's not always timely, especially when you're waiting on a GAN award letter, etc. There's a lot of factors that we adjust with. And one of the things that he did was he created a beautiful spreadsheet that helps me to set up my annual budget at the beginning of the year so that I can plan out everything and know exactly where those funds are coming from. And it was a resource that he provided to me after we sat down and really talked about it. Now, it fits for my purposes. It wouldn't necessarily fit for someone else, but he took the time to talk with me about exactly what I need in managing fiscal. So if you're having trouble, I think that might be a good resource for you to seek out. So it's a good solution. All right, let's talk about just a couple other items. What do we need to know when it comes to personnel and when it comes to hiring and dismissals and eligibility? So know California Ed Code. Go to California Ed Code if you have questions about what restrictions you might have or what procedures you need to follow in some of that information. Seek out information on your local board policies. That's a great place to go, as well as any bargaining unit agreements. The California Council on Teacher Credentialing can help you to understand what types of credentials and licenses might be needed for teaching various classes. When I'm planning to hire a staff member, I look up their credential long before I send the paperwork to our personnel department. I know what their credential is, I know what they're able to teach, and I look into that long before I'm asking our HR department to approve it. Clarify with your HR department, if you haven't been able to do that so far, what the processes are in hiring new folks. They change from time to time. I've found that depending upon who is in leadership at our district office, some of those processes will change, and I adjust to them. And I figure out, how do I make this happen that will satisfy their needs as well as the school's needs? And it just helps to make the process a little bit easier. Data and accountability. What do we need to know about data and accountability? Well, I think the question might be, what don't we need to know about data and accountability? Because it's one of our biggest challenges and one of the biggest sources of information that we should have at our fingertips. So understanding that there are different types of data. Demographics, participation, your outcome data, your follow-up data, numbers, but they all mean something different. Looking at the various values in data and who your audience is a real key part of data and accountability reporting. So when I prepare fact sheets for my district office and my local board and my community, I look at what is the data that's going to mean something to them. What will best tell the story of my organization in numbers, but help them to understand what we do and why we do it. Some of that data might not mean anything to them because it simply means it's an educational term, or it's completion, like level completions. Level completions don't mean anything to my community, but outcomes do. And so I might focus my reports or my fact sheets to those organizations depending upon what their particular interest might be. How many people we got back to work? How many people that we served also transitioned to community colleges? So we find ways to collect the data that we need that is important to our community, to our district, to our students, and to our staff. Just making sure that that data and accountability numbers mean something, and that value of that data is shared with the appropriate entities. Setting that aside, absolutely, we've got to stay on top of data reporting deadlines for AEBG, for WIOA, for any other kind of program areas that have deadlines. Meet those deadlines and making sure that we're well represented. Two of the last topics that are covered in the CalPro leadership that I want to talk about of what we need to know, and then we're going to go on to and talk about skills, but let's talk just a little bit about professional development and community partnerships and what we need to know and how we need to be participating in that. I mentioned earlier about another resource that CalPro has, and one of the two that I use all the time, I use every year with my teachers, is the instructor competency self-assessment. So my instructors do a self-assessment. It's theirs to keep. It provides them with a list of ideas and topics and resources in webinars and trainings that CalPro offers. And then if I'm able to, send or support those professional development opportunities with my staff. It's a starting point, but it's most important that they take that ownership of recognizing that their professional development is ongoing, just like everyone else in our profession. We've got to stay current with things. So those assessments, both the instructor and then the management competency self-assessment, that's another tool that you can use. Both of those are on the CalPro website, and they're great assessment tools that help you to think about where your growth areas are. So I would encourage you sometime after this webinar to look at the management competency self-assessment if you haven't yet, and take that. It doesn't take much time, and then it gives you some feedback. There are lots of opportunities for training with the leadership projects that include CalPro, OTAN, and CASAS. And staying current with practices and technologies. Technology is changing all the time, and I'm constantly amazed at how teachers are always learning more about how to use technology in the classroom, and they are far beyond what I know about technology in the classroom. And it's a great thing to see. When you see your staff and you see colleagues learning things that are new, it doesn't mean you have to learn them. It just means you be a part of that and support that effort. a new area, especially, well, I say new, but it's been around, just a changing area, is really the development of partnerships in the community, especially when you're focused on workforce development boards. With WIOA and the new MOUs that we have joined, those of you that are WIOA agencies, you know that being a part of the MOU is connecting and integrating services in your community. It's a new area for some of us. So others have been doing this for a long time and have integrated those services beautifully. We can learn from their examples. I would encourage you to go to one that you know of that is already in progress, has been in operation, and learn about how they collaborate, learn about how they connect students to other services in your community. Locally, in our organization, we connected with United Way. They had there was an article in the newspaper. I called up the director and I said, hey, I'll bet you don't know, but we're doing these services and let's talk about how we can integrate them. That partnership has grown to the capacity that they now provide scholarships for HiSET and GED testing for any student that's enrolled in our program who can't afford it. And that all came about because we connected locally. Be involved with your Chamber of Commerce and local organizations. They are a great resource. I did a presentation at a Chamber of Commerce and asked the audience, tell me 5 things that you want your people to be able to your employees be able to do better and more efficiently, because we're preparing workforce for those jobs. And they had so much fun just talking about what their needs are. And the funniest one that came out of that conversation was, help them to stop calling me dude as a boss. So it was kind of funny. Okay, let's shift and have a couple of minutes of discussion on skills. Skills are a little bit different than what we might talk about in knowledge. Knowledge is that stuff we need to know, and skills are those attributes that we need to have. So let's take a few minutes in the chat box to talk about what are the skills that you know you have, those strong skills, the skill sets that have become you as a person. They're your behaviors. They're what you see in yourself and you've seen in others that help you to shine as a leader. Is it your communication skills? Is it decision making? Is it how you involve others in decision making? Is it about your vision? Is it the development of the school culture that you have in your organization? Is it helping others to get through change? All of these are skills that that we develop sometimes through training and sometimes just naturally. So take a few minutes and let's share a little bit about the skills that you've developed and how you got them. Who was involved? Who helped you to learn those skills? And a lot of times we're surprised at where those skills come from. So I see many of you are typing. Great. I'm sure you've known leaders and people that you admire, and it's their skills that you see. It's how they communicate. It's how they provide stability during change. I know many of you are typing, and I'm anxious to see. There we go. Interpersonal relationship skills and communication skills are the strongest. And you know what, Lisa, some of those are the hardest ones to master. Being a social person helps. And then how did that come about? Was that naturally? Okay, she shares that she's done a lot of reading and started to develop those in herself. Laura shares that professional behavior and respect is one of her strengths. Great. Not only in the classroom, emitting a professionalism, our students need to learn to be professionals, not just students, but professionals. Great. Interpersonal relationships, very important, and improving communication just breeds that respect, absolutely. It also breeds a lot of trust. Christy shares vision, engage in others to participate and grow in the vision. Great. And she learned that from great professors at UCR Graduate School. Excellent. Mentioned again, mentors. Mentors are a great source of building those skills. Suzanne shares that she works in a very professional consortium that has inspired her with interpersonal relationships. They're open to ideas for serving students better, and a great group of leaders. Now, being around a great group of leaders is an excellent way of growing your own leadership skills. Cal Pro Leadership Institute is mentioned again, another great source of professional growth opportunity. And Charisse is a great leader for the institution. She sets the stage and makes things happen. It makes that a great way of learning. So that reminds me that we all have lots of resources for connecting with mentors and connecting with different folks. One of the things that Charisse mentioned early on, that I've been in adult education for 25 years, and I have a great group of friends that I grew up with in adult education, and Charisse Moore is one of them. Like she said, we met long ago, and there's a group of us that we kind of went through things together and learned together, saw each other at conferences and interacted. We were a source for one another to grow professionally. And I would encourage you to find that group of folks that you can connect with. So thank you for sharing those skills. So in looking at those professional development skills, many of your ideas were mentioned. Leadership Institute, look at publications. AXA has a leadership conference called the Leadership Summit, and someone else mentioned books. I've listed a couple of the authors on the side that I particularly go to. Patrick Lencioni is one of my favorites. I'll read everything that he ever writes. He is phenomenal. My two favorites are The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and The Advantage. Two great books. TED Talks, mentorships were mentioned. All of those help us to develop our skills as a leader. One of the best seminars I went to was Gettysburg Leadership Institute that took place in Pennsylvania and ended in Washington, D.C. Very little about education, but a lot about leadership. And it really transformed and changed my methods and my way of leading an organization. It really was phenomenal. And for everyone, take those opportunities to go to leadership conferences. So to wrap up, a couple of last things that we have in the time that I have left with you today. This is what we've kind of gone through, we've talked about profiles of adult education leadership. We've talked about what we need to do in building that knowledge base and what the key topic areas are, or the key elements to focus on in building that knowledge. We've talked about developing leadership skills and what those interpersonal relationship skills are needed, and how we can develop some of those. And we've shared a little bit about resources. And once again, there is a resource, a list that I've prepared for you of websites for all of these different organizations as well, and a few others. So that will be shared with you. And so what our final steps are for today is to determine, to kind of do a reflective look at where you are personally in your self-assessment of knowledge gaps that you might have. So however you want to do that, I encourage you after the webinar, take some time and really think about, what do I know and what do I need to know? Where are my knowledge gaps? If I need to do the CalPro self-assessment. And then set a few, not many, but a few goals that will help you to get there. Maybe a few this year and a few next year. Make the timeline reasonable for you, and then venture into the information that you need to find out how to grow there. Build that network that I mentioned of colleagues and friends, and create a library of resources so that you have the sources that you need to go to when you need it. Because you never know when you're going to need that information, and you need to be able to go to that source. And with your skills, look at, where can I grow as a leader professionally? Select a couple of them, again, and plan to develop them. Talk to a mentor about learning how to be a strong leader in adult education, and a strong leader in education as a whole, and a community member. And then monitor your growth and progress at a time. And I'll share with you one little thing that was shared with me by a colleague when I first started working at Corona Norco Adult School. I could sense that the staff really wasn't in the same direction or alignment that I was, and I wasn't quite sure what that gap was about in my skill set. And when I asked a very trusting individual, he said, "Jody, you just need to spend a little more time with them, and you need to listen." And so I made it my point to spend time with staff, talk with them, and more importantly, listen. And I noticed a big difference. I noticed a huge difference. And it seems like a very simple thing, but when I'd walk through the door and run right past everybody and say hi, and go straight back to focus on the quote-unquote work at hand, and I missed that opportunity to chat, it really impacted my effectiveness as a leader. Okay, at the end, we're here at the end of what I have to share with you. If you have any additional questions or comments or anything else you would like to share, I'd like to give you the opportunity to do that. You can see on the screen, there's my email information, phone number, and my Twitter handle. So if you have any other questions or comments that you'll come across in the next couple of days or whatever, you're welcome to do that.
All right. Jody, thank you so very, very much for this wonderful webinar. It was very motivational. I am excited, and I am looking forward to taking some of what you shared today and incorporating it within the Leadership Institute as well. I see Burr said this should be a module of it, and absolutely we're going to see how we can incorporate this, because it was very inspiring and very timely in helping us to think about the big picture of what our role is. and how we do that well, what we need to know. So thank you so very much. I see some folks changing, but I'm going to be changing the layout one more time so that we can get you some access to materials here. And so if you were typing, please continue that in the general chat that's on the bottom left. But we want to make sure that we have you download the PowerPoint that was shared. If you didn't get that at the beginning, it's here available for you again. And then we also have the resource list. Winnie, if you can point us to where we can find the resource list, that would be great as well. The instructions for how to download are in that pod on the bottom left, right below the PowerPoint. And then we want to encourage you to mark your calendars now for the next Administrators Forum webinar, which will be on March the 7th, and it will be on the topic of negotiation skills and negotiating change. And that will be again on March the 7th, so mark your calendar now. We know that there's a lot that will be happening around that time as you're getting your budgets prepared and making decisions with staffing, and so we thought it would be timely to have that webinar for you on that topic at that time. And in the middle box below this PowerPoint, you'll see now the resource has been added that Jody was referencing with all the information that you can find for the links and references that she referred to, some of the tools that were in the red box along the slides in her presentation. We also want to make sure that you complete the evaluation, which is to the bottom on the far right. That lets us know what we can do better to make the webinars even better for you. We appreciate your time and want your feedback, and we want to hear what else you'd like us to share in future webinars. We're at 2 o'clock now, and I'm going to give you a moment to download the resources, and then we'll be closing out the webinar shortly after that. Thank you all so very much, and have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.